Now that's significant. The Market Research Podcast.
Hi there, welcome to a very impromptu episode of Now That's Significant. And for those of you who have been following our podcast, you might remember our prior episode was in fact Rob Volpe, apologies. And you may be wondering, why on earth are we having this follow-up episode? And it's a very good question, one which I will leave to Rob Volpe.
Michael, thanks for having me back. And actually just picking up on something we had been talking about, which, we were talking about the dangers of empathy. And in our discussion, I shared what was happening at the time with Bud Light and the inclusive campaign they had tried to do with a transgender actress and content creator, Dylan Mulvaney. And they had, as part of, I guess, their broader March Madness campaign, had sent her a Bud Light can with her image on it. And she did, as good creators will do in collaboration with a brand, did a kind of unveiling or whatever on Instagram. So excited about that. And it immediately sparked controversy with people that are on the far right and that are, I guess I can say that they're but they did not believe that Bud Light should be doing that because it doesn't represent their values. So started with Kid Rock, the musician, taking, I don't know if it was a machine gun or what, but he took a high-powered rifle of some sort and decimated several cases of Bud Light that he had stacked up outside of his home. And you've seen other violent acts of destroying cases of Bud Light. I saw one TikTok, I think it was, where somebody drove over them in this big oversized pickup truck and other people throwing them out. And Bud Light sales actually dropped 17% in a week. And from what I was reading in the trades, sales were picked up. It wasn't like the entire category dropped, because you might think, well, what's causing all this? Is it just that? It wasn't the category drop because the other beer manufacturers, Molson Coors and others, dollar sales. And so the category, I think, stayed where it was, but Bud Light had a big drop and then other beers recovered. And so Bud Light had been sort of standing behind everything. And when we recorded the initial episode, they were, sticking to their guns, and Bud Light's been supportive of the gay community, the trans community in the past. So I wasn't terribly surprised to see that. And then over this past weekend, a few days ago, they released a statement. They're just saying that they didn't, intend to create such a controversy, get into such a heated discussion. They want to bring people together over a beer, which was actually very reminiscent to me of a really wonderful Heineken campaign that ran over in Europe, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. So Bud Light gives this kind of tepid response, trying to, I think, play both sides and placate both sides. And then they've now subsequently suspended the 2 senior marketing executives that were overseeing Bud Light. And of course, making some corporate sort of excuse of, we're flattening our organization and doing that, but there's only 2 people that have been affected by this. So read between the lines of what's going on. And it's really evidence of, part of our conversation of like, what happens when a brand is trying to have empathy with different consumers. And in Bud Light's case, they have been in some level of decline for quite a while. And so wanting to stay relevant, reaching out to Gen Z, which is generally more inclusive and accepting of the diversity that's in our society these days. So they wanted to talk to that audience, and that was great. And they did it in a very sort of empathetic way, supporting Dylan in her transition and her journey. However, unintended consequence of angering a pretty active fan base and consumer base that's purchasing quickly. So I wanted to bring it back up and just talk about it a little bit more, because now Anheuser-Busch is in this odd middle ground where they're not going to be able to please, like, what do? You can't please either side. And you need to use empathy in these situations with both sides. And maybe there's a little bit more honest discussion, hopefully a more honest statement of like, yeah, we do need to talk to today's Americans, and that includes people in the trans community and in other, kind of more underrepresented communities. And Bud Light's always done that. We've always stood for America and what's in there. But right now, there's a lot of fallout that's starting to happen. Interestingly, somebody pointed out that Anheuser-Busch's share price hasn't taken a hit yet. So I think the investors on Wall Street are still thinking this is all going to blow over, which I would imagine it probably will. But there are bigger lessons here. If you're working on a brand or you're advising a brand and you're wanting, you can't do things sort of surreptitiously and not expect that somebody else is going to find out. Like, thanks to the internet, thanks to social media, everything's available to everybody at all times and at all times. And so, it's not really a surprise that what they did with a trans individual wasn't going to get noticed by people on the opposite side of the political fence. And so it's so critical to be treading with, caution, and being mindful of what you're doing and being willing to deal with the consequences.
That's right. So I guess so that's the context of what we're talking about here, but we can make it about a generic brand. It doesn't have to be just them. So you've got essentially you want to have empathy for both sides, for everyone, say, but if you make a decision on one side, you're being empathetic to them, but you're possibly alienating another audience, and we did discuss that in the podcast. What options are there? Like, how do brands navigate through the empathy for a much broader target to not be caught in a area where there's just no activity? You just don't do anything.
Well, I think there's a few things that come to mind for me, and I'm reminded of the Ipsos Pepsi study that found that like 9 out of 10 consumers want brands to show empathy through their actions. So you do need to be doing that. That's what today's about. I think the place that I would go to, honestly, if I'm any brand, is start thinking about the kind of emotional driven pieces. What are the things that still unite us and connect us, regardless of which side of the fence that you're on? And how might those relate back to your brand? And what are the things that might be ownable for you? So elevating your messaging up and out, but you're still going to have that empathy, because it's like, oh yeah, I can see myself. That's a strong value that I have, or belief, or need. And I can relate to that. Therefore, that brand is I feel connected to it. I'm going to support them. And then it's less about the actual, kind of politics or specific demographics, and really moving into more of a psychographic approach.
And if you were if this happened to Ignite 360, for instance, if you had come into a situation like this with one of your campaigns, how would you move forward? What path would you go take in such a situation?
I mean, it's hard being a much smaller, even with a 70% sales dip. Bud Light just sold, in the amount of time that we're talking, they probably sold as much money as we make in a year at Ignite 360. Yeah. I've taken a position as the CEO and the founder of a company, and I commit to it. I mean, and it's interesting because we have done work for organizations that are more conservative, that are probably typically more right-leaning, thinking of a gun accessory manufacturer. With a little bit, it's been a while. They have have everybody has a right to have insights and learning and understanding. And I think if they are interested in learning about who their consumer is, truly, we're a great, kind of resource to do that. And, there's obviously others, but we're still really good at what we're doing. I think so. I've been talking about this issue on LinkedIn in particular. I shared a New York Times article that came out today. I had another post about how the right started to look for who to hate and who to decide to hate after gay marriage became legal in the United States, thanks to the Supreme Court ruling. And they quickly found trans issues. And I just posted on that like Thursday or Friday of last week. So this is like an ongoing thing for me as and I'm a representative of the company. So I guess if, honestly, if somebody came to me with that as an issue, I'm going to, stand my ground, because what I believe in is a place for everybody. I don't believe in hate. I don't believe that the way to signal a protest is to pull out an assault rifle and shoot up cases of the product. Yeah, it's great theater, makes for a great, viral video, but that's not the way that you really need to come together and discuss things. So I would try to, I think, stand by our values, and at the same time try to listen and have a conversation if one can be had constructively. I think the problem for Bud Light in this case, who do they go talk to? Are they supposed to go have a beer with Kid Rock and make it okay? Are they like, where is all that going? And so, if you're in that situation, you've got to, it's a fine line, and it's a hard one, but I would hope, they made a decision to do this. I don't think getting rid of the executives or suspending them, putting them on leave, I don't think that's an answer either. And for the record, we're not an agency that works with Bud Light or Anheuser-Busch. So I'm not, I don't know anything about the inner workings of the organization. So, but yeah, it's what, why, what's that going to serve? I think you need to try to find a path that moves forward. I think it's an opportunity for them to put together a bigger, more compelling message around what does Bud Light actually stand for. That might be something that they've been wrestling with generally, as they've been trying to find relevance with a broader, or younger consumer. So, at this point, how do you turn that into an opportunity?
Yeah. So
not just through the issue, but then how do you move ahead?
No, sure. And look, one of those ways to move ahead is potentially rebranding or evolving your brand. And so that could be at a product level, or you could potentially create a new product as well. So two different streams there. I mean, it's a lot harder to shift your brand. Creating a new brand could be one way to open that up, and then I guess at least you're starting from a blank slate per se. Not to say that evolution can't happen in the background, but
yeah, well, I guess Bud Light could poke a little fun at it. Their cans right now are blue, I think, generally. So why don't they do, here in the States, it's, blue is Democrat, red's Republican. Why not do blue cans and red cans and, color code the cases and just kind of send some subtle signals that way, or make them all, a mix of red, white, and blue as a representation of what to, it isn't a very American beer. And the thing with Bud Light is it's so mainstream. It's just got broad penetration. It's a massive brand still. And so, yeah, you could try to do some sort of a stunt with your packaging to try to move things forward, to send a message. I think you've really got to have a very integrated campaign that's like at the product level, what can you do? And then, and use the communications and those touch points at the cooler where the product is being purchased, at the grocery store, the ABC store, C store, wherever, and goes into people's homes. I mean, they take a case, it's a fridge pack, you throw it in the fridge, or whatever. And then what do you do on the bottle or the can itself? And then what do you do with your TV and your social and all of those other things? And I think at the broader, higher level for any of these mass brands, I mean, Disney's been running into, some issues. They're having some fights in Florida. This Bud Light issue, Pepsi had some issues a few years ago. It's an interesting challenge that brand management marketers are in, because there's a desire from consumers to have a brand empathize with me. The Supreme Court effectively said during a decision that companies are people, and they can make donations and do all those things. So there are things, and brands are getting personified through their social media presence, the way they engage with people, the way that they're communicating. So this is the dark side of all of that, and you've got to be prepared on how to navigate. So, is make sure you got a good crisis management team lined up. Make sure that you're just in case, and have them on speed dial. And you should do that anyway for any business. Know who you're going to call in a crisis, but then really do the research, get the insights together, and think about the ramifications. Like, so often, I'm sure you see this too, clients will do research with, the target audience for this ad campaign is this, therefore we're going to go find out to make sure it resonates with them. And it's like, well, yeah, but that audience isn't the entire audience. It's your consumer set. It might be a good part of it, but what about the others? Or, if you're making a move in this direction, are you going to alienate somebody else? And I think if you're stepping into those waters, and I think I don't know, in the moment you don't necessarily always think through those things, but it's like, okay, you're going to do something. If I can't imagine if you're working on Bud Light, you don't realize that you've got a really strong conservative consumer base. It's about knowing who your consumer is and understanding who they are. So you should be doing, it can't just be who you want it to be, but who's actually buying it. And then really, having empathy with all those different segments and understanding how are they going to respond to this, and do we think there's going to be a real backlash, and make sure you're using the right research tool to get you the right answer. Because, you can throw something like that out into a focus group, like, oh, hey, conservatives, we're going to do this campaign with Dylan Mulvaney. Well, if you don't know that everybody in that focus group, I'm a respondent, I don't know that everybody in that focus group is also conservative necessarily. I may just say what's polite. I may, and voting with your wallet isn't necessarily something that you're having to speak out loud about. It's a silent sort of protest, if you would. So I see the people that are influencing me and doing all of that, and that's where I'm making my decision. And that research, a focus group setting might not be the right way to learn that. You might need to have individual conversations with people. You might need to do them online where there's a little bit more distance, and so it might feel safer to say something, or other methods in order to really understand what's happening.
So let's assume then these focus groups went on, and you had a mix of people from both your conservative and your left. Have you seen a mix of digital and in person within those focus groups happen? So people have time and space to say something potentially a little bit more leaning to their way than the others, like without on their own volition, for instance.
Yeah, you've got to really be mindful going in of how, like, who are you recruiting? So who's going to be in this group, and how are you as a moderator setting that group up kind of for success? And by success, I mean getting the information that you need, not necessarily what you want, but information need. So I guess an example I would think of is, if you have a group, there've been instances that I've heard of with other firms, and I hear this through moderators, where if you've got a focus group of Black respondents and you put a white moderator in there, it can create a distance, and the respondents will end up being a little more performative, or they'll code switch. And so you're not going to necessarily get the real authentic deal. So, in that situation, like, okay, if we were going to do this group, I want to understand how conservatives are going to respond to Dylan. I would set up in the group and introduce through an intro question or just a statement from the moderator, like, who's in this group? What's, what political leanings, and get that out on the table. And then what are your, and then you can introduce the stem of the beer bud can and other stuff that you'd put in there because you'd want to utilize the time, and see how they respond. But once they have to know that it's a safe space, and you as the moderator have to tell them, you got to just tell me how it really is. You're not going to hurt my feelings. That's what I typically do, because I want them to be safe. And I don't identify myself as a gay man from San Francisco when I'm moderating typically, so they wouldn't know any of that detail anyway. But yeah, you want to make it feel as safe a space as possible. So who's the moderator? How are you asking the questions? Who's the composition in that group? And helping get them to open up, because that's what you want, the honest truth.
So any other reach outs or the roles that you think market researchers can play in helping have more of a balanced, empathetic approach or campaigns in the future?
I think what this is, and even in this conversation is coming up, like, as you're consulting with your clients, or if you're a client side researcher and you're thinking through what your approach might be to this, we're at a point, and I think these are great examples, where you can't just go to, oh, I want this particular audience. You've got to think about the broader audience and make sure you're checking that off. It also includes, like, get out of the major cities, go do, and that's a great benefit of online research or online qualitative, is you can really get a great representation. But then you've got to, the values or the way people live versus in rural America is very different. And there are some great recruiting firms that set up rural sort of focus group situations. There's different ways to do that. So again, it's about, like, understanding who your consumer is and talking to them. And conservative women outside of Chicago may not have had an issue with this Bud Light project, but conservative women in rural Missouri or rural Illinois, even in the same state, might have very different feelings about it. So again, it's like, understand where's your business, who makes it up, and make sure that you're hearing all sides.
Yes, I mean, it's safe to say that Bud Light would not have wanted to alienate or be basically to have any damage done wise to both those in the conservative and to the LGBTQ as well. Likewise, they wouldn't have wanted to cause any damage by pulling the campaign as well. So they set out, obviously, to help people enjoy their drinks whenever they want to. So
right,
that is the key thing that we want to come across here. They haven't set out necessarily to to cause people harm.
no, not at all. And I think it's the nature of the world we're living in today, like, things have changed. It used to be you could do very targeted advertising in magazines or whatever, and people on maybe even websites, and people wouldn't necessarily see it except for the intended audience. And now You just need to kind of search, or people will share it. And if the algorithm happens to scoop up the right person, or you get a celebrity with large following, or an influencer or creator with a large following, and it can open up a big can of worms. Because there are all these sort of we don't have one discourse anymore. There is no one great societal conversation. There's all of these different communications that are happening, and side channels and things jumping from one to the next, and that the world's fundamentally different. So you've got to be thinking about how things actually are today, which is that anybody can access anything at any point. And they probably know, even if you don't really want them to, or and then we're looking for some level of validation. So hey, it's going to get a lot of views if I do something really extreme with my Bud Light. And I don't know that those creators are necessarily advocating violence against the trans community. They're making a statement about their feelings about Bud Light. The thing that I am always concerned about with something like that is the person that sees video that may not necessarily understand the intention behind it, or think that, well, that's what they need to go and do. And then they're, out committing a crime, or have ill will, ill intent, towards whomever it is.
Yes, well, I do thank you for spending this short little time on discussing this, Rob. And I guess if anyone wants to chat more about empathy in times of crisis, or potentially if you've got something on your mind, a project that you want to think about that may be a little bit controversial as well, but you're doing it for the right reasons, then feel free to hit up Rob at Ignite 360. But we definitely have our work cut out for us as market researchers, and we want to be leading our brands, our clients, etc., into paths as smooth as possible towards success that is accommodating to as broad a range of people as we want to. So
it is truly a significant issue that I think the industry and just society is going to start facing, and we're going to have to work our way through it.
Yeah, and if it's not in diversity and inclusivity, it's something else. So
yeah,
we'll always have stuff that will come up. So
exactly. Awesome. Thank you, Michael.
That's right, and thank you for listening to this pop-up episode. It's been nice to be able to be reactive and talk about things that do matter to the industry and our society. So thanks for listening to Now That's Significant.